Well, hello and welcome to the Alpha Anywhere Demo and Q&A webcast. I'm Dave McCormick from Alpha Software. I'm pleased to be joined by Dion McCormick, no relation, our lead solution engineer here at Alpha Anywhere. Today, Dan will be going over mapping, I believe, client-side and server-side mapping and understanding the difference and how to use them. He'll also be taking your questions, and this is a questions-driven broadcast, so please type your questions into the questions box of the GoToWebinar control panel. You can type them in at any time. Now would be a good time, as any. So let's begin. Oh, one thing to know, this session is being recorded. We did have a problem recently with our video library, and I will show you a little bit later on how to get back to our old video library, which we have now restored, and how to see all of the pre-recordings, the recorded sessions of these. So let's begin. Hello, Dion, are you there?
Yes, sir. Glad to hear from you.
Great. Let me go ahead and
go.
Make it a presenter.
Okay, you should see my screen coming up now.
Yep, I sure do.
I don't mean to shock anybody. I know it's, yeah, be like, whoa, it's a little too early for that picture. Thank you, everybody. I missed everybody the last couple weeks. Summer has begun. I'm sure everybody's very busy switching their schedule around based on kids out of school and other things like that. It's very fun. But we have a really good presentation scheduled for you today. Really, as we do more and more mobile work with Alpha, it's really important to understand kind of the different parts of Alpha and what is focused on what is mobile versus what is focused on, say, more of a connected environment. So we're going to go through that a little bit today. But first, I wanted to remind everybody that registration is open for Alpha DevCon 2016 coming up in September. I mean, we're already in summer, so it's only a few months away. And this is going to be an amazing event, and we really encourage everybody to participate, both to learn all the new stuff, but also more importantly is to make connections with other developers and other people in the ecosystem that will really help you out over the next year. Along with that also is we have the, let's see, is it down here? We also have the pre-training that's available now. So I highly encourage you to register also with the pre-conference training that will take place the day before. We're going to be focused on mobile optimization.
Just the training tab there, Dan.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's
yeah, simple.
I know.
There you go. Takes a village. So this shows a little bit. We'll be bringing out some more information the next couple of weeks on the content, but if you're going to be doing mobile work in the next year, this training is for you because it will have the power of giving you all the core skills that you need to create your own mobile solutions using all the new mobile optimized form technology, including on things like photo capture and ink controls and creating your own editors. And it's just going to be a very packed day, but you'll come away with a base skill set that will provide you enormous capabilities in the next year. So make sure to take the time to sign up. Again, you can go to alphasoftware.com. And if we just go to the main menu here, let me go there, you'll see up in the left-hand corner we have our Alpha DevCon. Click on here, and from right in here you can click the register now to move into that. So going to be a fabulous one there. We have a packed summer. We're working on other content to bring to you over this summer in preparation for the DevCon, and also to kind of highlight some of the great new capabilities that continue to be included in the Alpha platform. So today what we're going to do is focus on something very interesting. So before I start that, everything coming through okay, Dave?
Yes, it sure is.
Okay, great. So I wanted to talk about mapping, and we've talked about mapping before, specifically showing you how you can use, say, a grid component with built-in mapping to quickly put together maps, even searchable maps. But obviously, one of the key features and capabilities of mobile devices, mobile phones and tablets, is the built-in geolocation capability. Specifically, in all mobile phones, they have GPS capability along with Wi-Fi that helps it localize themselves. And the cool thing about that is that it provides you the ability to do wonderful mapping techniques on the phone, which are powerful for a couple things. Simple things like, where am I? What directions do I need to get where I'm going? But also mapping has a huge impact in terms of field service, specifically trapping geolocation information to track activity in the field, planning routes, putting on a set of upcoming meetings or locations you need to attend so you can optimize your services. So the focus on this is going to be talking a little bit more about mapping on the mobile device versus a desktop web. So with that, what I want to talk about was first is kind of a little bit of a server side versus client. And there's been a little confusion in the last couple projects regarding this. And it impacts mapping in a very specific way, which I'll show you today. So remember, as kind of a refresher, you have your client-side environment, whether it's a desktop web or a phone or a mobile device, and then you have your server side. And different processing occurs on different sides. They work in conjunction together to provide whatever services you need to provide. But the important thing to realize is that if you're going to use any kind of server-side capabilities, you may not always have that connection. Because if you have a client-side device that is disconnected, then you're going to have a scenario where you don't have access to the server and you don't have access to those services. Now, it can be a blend. Sometimes you do have access, sometimes you don't. But you have to look at your application and decide, am I going to have a situation where my client side is going to be disconnected? If I do, then I need to take different approaches in regards to how I build my app and how I put together that. And nowhere is that more important than in the mapping area. There's a lot of really key functionality built into Alpha to help you do mapping very simply, but you have to kind of know when to use the different types. And that's what today's demonstration is about. So in one of our latest releases, actually Selwyn put in place a demonstration of this information to kind of show how you can use the different techniques. So I'm going to go ahead and show you an operation.
Can I just stop you right there for one second?
Oh, sure, sir. Yes.
That slide, someone pointed out something that I thought was quite good. The client-side JavaScript, sure. Server-side, you don't mean Action JavaScript. You might mean,
oh, yeah.
XBasic, I think, right? Though JavaScript can work. So server-side language, XBasic.
Okay.
And
yeah, maybe this makes a little bit more sense. That's a very good point.
Support Node.js, so you can do JavaScript on the server as well. But thank you for pointing that out, person who just put in. Yep. Yeah,
that's true, because Action JavaScript does run here. The issue, and I'll talk about in a few minutes, is that the Action JavaScript for mapping depends on server-side activity going on. And that's what the real crux of this is, that if you use the built-in Action JavaScript, it's relying on the server being there, and you cannot guarantee that at all time. But thank you very much for bringing that to my attention there. Okay, so let me go ahead and show you this in action. This is an example component, and Dave, I can send it to you so we can send it out and have it available there. Very simple kind of component. Basically, you have a list of locations and a map component all on one UX. And I'll walk you through how this is built so you have a little better understanding of how it is. And so I can do something very simple. I can click on a location in the list, and I can say add marker from list control to map. And you'll see at that point, let me shrink it out or bring it out a little bit, it basically takes that location information and inserts it onto the map. And you'll see in a few moments we're using Action JavaScript, which makes it very simple to do that, to perform this activity. Let's go ahead and try that. We'll action there. So as you can see, as I select different locations, I'm actually able to quickly add that marker to the list, and it's updating that marker's location each time. But the real trick is doing that, I'm using Action JavaScript, and it's relying on the server to be able to perform that activity. Now I have another button up here in the left-hand corner called, it says all markers. That should be add all markers to the list on the map. And if I click on this, you'll notice something. You'll see that it almost instantly updated, and it actually added all of these onto the map. So basically it added all of these at one time onto the map. Now the difference between the two is that this add all markers, when I click on that, that is pure JavaScript. There was no call to the server. When I clicked on this where I said add marker, you'll notice the marker already exists on there, so it's just re-adding it on there. There's not a clear function. But when I'm clicking on here, it's actually making a callback to the server and doing some work and then updating the map appropriately. And that's fine. That works great if you have a connection to the server. And going back to our image here is that if you don't have that, then that will fail, and that's not a good thing to happen for your app out in the field. If you do, everything works fine. So the first step is to understand, if I'm going to be disconnected, then I have to look at doing a little bit more JavaScript. And again, very simple, it's all built in, but you just need to be aware of it. So let me do this. What I'd like to do now is kind of walk you through what happens when I click both of these different buttons, so you have a feel for how they work. So let me go ahead and go back into my design environment, For people who are new to Alpha, this is our UX component, which is our form. On the left, we have all the different types of controls. In the center is the layout of ours, so you can see we have the two buttons on top. And then a container that has a list and a map sitting side by side. And then on the right are the different parameters or properties that are associated with each button or each item on the interface. Okay, so let's go ahead and first let's look at the structure. So we have a map component, and the way I put that out on the serve is I just clicked on map here in the data controls, and that added to the map. And you'll see in here that I made a few little adjustments in terms of the width and other pieces along those lines, but really simple. I just added that map. The next thing I did was I created a list control, and the way I did that was first I took this list control and dragged it out here, and then I went into the list properties, and in here I put in data. Now, for people who are newer, a list control is what's showing that list of locations, and the list control can be populated in multiple different fashions, through a connection to a SQL database, to a connection to a DBF, through static, which we're using, and I'll show you that, and also a very powerful one called custom, where you can actually call a function and populate the list, a data series, or a JavaScript function. So there's a lot of flexibility in terms of the source of data that goes to the list. In our case, we're using static. So very simple is that in our list data, we basically just have a simple static representation of data. So it's a name, a city, a state, a latitude, and longitude. So as you can see, we have the city, our name, a pipe character, the city, the state, and then the latitude and the longitude. So my list is just a series of this information in that list. And instead of making it come from a database, this could easily be populated out of a database just through a SQL query. In this case, I just pasted in this static data that's there. This also can be sourced from things like client-side data caches. We'll talk a little bit more in a few moments here. Okay, so my list, so when I run this, it takes that static data, and you'll see it just presents it on the screen. We're not showing the longitude, but we're showing the latitude here. But you'll see it has the name, the city, and the state. And all it's doing is taking those different columns and laying them out on there. Now, if I select one and click Add Marker from List Control, you'll see that once I've done that, it actually updates the map on here. Now, how that's working is the following, is that on my list, if I select an item, that's the selected item in the list, and then I have a button up here called Add Marker from List, and to add behavior to that, I use the click event. So this button has a whole bunch of different events, but the one that's obviously the most important used is a click event. And remember, if you're on like a mobile device, that's essentially the same thing as a press, you know, like when you tap on the mobile device, that's the same thing as a click event. So I'm going to go ahead and open that up, and you'll see that I've opened it up. You'll see that I'm in my Action JavaScript builder. And the Action JavaScript builder is very powerful because it has a whole bunch of pre-made components or pre-made sort of behaviors that you can tap into. Things that involved opening UX components, reports, messaging, mapping, etc. that are all in here. And so it makes it very easy for you to add behaviors to your system. So if you'll see in here, I already have a behavior called the Google Map Method UX component. And basically to get to that, I clicked Add New Action. I typed in Map up here, and you'll see I have Google Map Method UX component added to it. Now, the way this is configured is we go in there, and we see the map ID is map. That's the map that we have on our user interface. We have an action on here. In this case, it's a very simple action called Add a Marker to the Map. As you can see, there's actually a whole bunch of other commands you can add without writing any JavaScript at all. It will take care of it for you. Things like centering map, removing markers, etc. that you may want to do on your application. But for us, we're adding that marker. Now, the next thing it's doing is it's asking me what control. In this case, we're going to get the data from a list control. It could have been explicit. It could have been some other controls. It could be JavaScript. Excuse me, or even the device location. We can actually dynamically read that and put that on there. Next, it's asking me which list, and then it's saying, well, in that list, which are the columns that I'm going to use to actually render it? Because it could be an address where it'll do the geocoding for you, or it could be latitude and longitude. And then I can modify the markers as appropriate. But as you can see, I didn't have to write any JavaScript. Basically, I selected the map, the action I wanted to take, filled out a few other pieces of information in terms of where they're getting the information from. Click OK, go into my working preview. I select one of my list items, I hit add marker, does everything for me. Very simple, very straightforward on that. Now the trick though is that built into that Action JavaScript, it's actually making a callback to the server. So in that scenario, when I have added that, it's basically there's a piece of Action JavaScript, but it's making this callback to the server. So if I'm disconnected, if I don't have a network connection, then that map will not update properly, which could be a very bad thing if you don't want it. So, again, from a lot of apps, if you're just using it on a web browser, you're already connected to the internet, no big deal. So like if you had a dispatch app where you were showing markers on a map, you don't have to go into a lot of effort because you can literally, you're going to have a connection to the server. You can update it accordingly, thus saving yourself an enormous amount of development time and effort to write up your pieces. But let's say we do have the situation where we want to be able to do mapping but not have to call the XBasic through Action JavaScript. Well, with that in mind, we can use a different method. So we have this add all markers, and you'll see it immediately does and adds all those markers. And how that works is the following. So if I go to my second button here, add all markers, I go to the click event. This is what's going to be triggered when the person presses on that button. You'll notice in here that there's just a little piece of code. Instead of Action JavaScript, I'm on text mode, and so therefore there's a function call here called add markers, and that is a local JavaScript function that is present on the mobile device. So in this case, it's not making a call back to the server, it's just making a quick call to a local function that will then perform the activity that you need. So now let's go ahead and look at what this function does. So I'm going to go ahead and close that. I'm going to go to the left-hand side, and you'll notice I not only have my controls, but here I have my code, either JavaScript or if I had XBasic callbacks, XBasic on the backside. So I'm going to click JavaScript functions, and you'll notice that there's a function in here called add markers. So when the person clicks on that button, all it's going to do is call this item right here. And so this, I'm not going to go into super detail. It's not very hard to go through, but you'll notice in here that we're just running some JavaScript. So we get a pointer to our map object. And then we set up a variable called settings, which will pass to a command in JavaScript to actually render the little item. So in here, we're setting up all the different parameters, like is it draggable? Is there animation? Is there any emphasis, etc. So think of this as kind of the settings for when it actually puts the pins on the map. They're presented in a certain way, including what group they're a part of, which can be used for manipulation purposes there. So then what I do is I create an array of objects. So remember, when I'm running this here, when I click on this button right here, it actually goes through every one of these items here and then adds that marker to the map. And so that's literally walking through all of the data that's available in this list and adding the markers there. So what I do is I create an array, and again, this isn't a JavaScript class, but as you can see, not super there. I get a pointer to my list because that's where that list of data is. And then therefore, all I do is I go through that and I basically put into that array the latitude and longitude for each item in that list. So I'm basically walking down that list, reading each item, and for each item saying, okay, give me the latitude of that, give me the longitude, and then I'm calling a very powerful little function called map object add marker. So basically I put a marker on there with the array data, which will have that information in it, and the settings, and it's basically walking through that whole list there, adding marker after marker after marker after marker. And then what it does is then it says view marker groups. So basically the markers are added hidden, but they're all part of that one group. This last little command here says, okay, now show all of those markers, and that's all there is. So we set up basically in this, we set up a setting which will say how that marker is going to look. We get a pointer to the list, we walk through that list and and add the markers one after another and show it there. So as you can see that it's a little more cryptic, a little easier just to use point and click for XBasic. But the beauty of this is that now you don't depend on the server. This can happen completely independent of the server. Basically, it will sit there and run through this process, add those markers, whether you have an internet connection or not. And this is you'll see that we have a very rich set of functions that are available to you from the items here. And if you're interested in finding out more of what those are, you can go into our new and improved documentation system by going to Help, Open Documentation. You can look up JavaScript mapping, and we have a very broad set of sort of mapping commands built into it. And that's a very powerful way to do that and experiment with it. So as you can see, you have really two options. One option is you can use the built-in XBasic, which is very simple, very easy to use, or you could write yourself a little JavaScript, as you can see, maybe 40, 50 lines. Once you kind of get the hang of it, it's going to be kind of copy and paste, and that works. But you can pick and choose depending on your environment. But the most important thing to realize about this is that if I click this button right here, that will happen only if I have a network connection to my server. When I click this, it can happen whether I'm connected to the server or not. And so therefore, you have a lot more flexibility in terms of the ability to work offline and be able to have the person do what they need to do with the application, but not forcing them to have a connection there. And so this was included in the last release, 4.1, and I just wanted to kind of give people a little heads up on it. Again, let me see. Go to, hold on a second, Alpha 5 pre-release. I'm sorry, I'm going to try and locate that for everybody there. And this is just the release notes. And I think it's far down here. I'll have to see, oh, here it is. There we go. So I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste this into the chat window so everybody has it there. Okay, so if you go to that and then search for the following text on that page, there it's in your GoToWebinar control panel. It should be map control, adding control markers. And you'll find that basically here's a video that kind of walks through what I did here. But more importantly is you can download this component, so you're not going to have to sit down and write it out and put those pieces together, meaning you don't have to sit there and try and watch my video and write the text down. It's all built in, ready to go there. And very powerful. But you know what's neat about the JavaScript and those capabilities is that we have a very rich set of mapping commands. You can add markers, modify markers, highlight them, to emphasize them, do a whole bunch of different things. And that's available whether you use the XBasic capabilities. You can see we have a wide range of these different commands that can be done using our Action JavaScript, or there's an equivalent JavaScript to each one of these. So if you did want to use it in JavaScript, all of these kind of functions are available to you to be able to do that. So you can create very rich mapping applications. And for mobile, that's become such a critical aspect of any mobile, is that mapping capability. So that kind of shows what we have here. See there? So I wanted to go ahead and hand that back to, I hope everybody's been putting in their questions. If you have questions about this, obviously I can answer those. But remember, the last thing I'm going to say is just make sure you understand the use case for your application, whether it can be connected to the server or if it needs to be disconnected, and just take the appropriate steps when you develop it to make sure that you can satisfy that core use case.
Excellent. Well, we have a lot of questions, which is great, but by all means, keep them coming in. I think it's going to be a lively session today. I have a good feeling about this. But let's start with, you were saying, keep in mind whether it's going to be connected to the server or not connected to the server. The question is, what if it's not connected to the internet, not just the server, but the internet? Can you keep geographical images live? Is that supported yet, or is that a little bit more tricky?
No, at this time, no, because we're using Google Maps. So when I'm doing this, I mean, that's a very good answer, is that the actual information here is being delivered from Google. So the key is you don't need a connection to the Alpha server, but you will need a connection there. And actually, if you use any other mapping application out there, you'll notice that it may put it on the map, but then the actual picture of where it's at doesn't show up because it can't connect to Google and bring down those map tiles or whatever it's going to use to display for the use from there. Obviously, the answer is that with our built-in capabilities, you are kind of limited in that way, but there's nothing to say you couldn't use alternative mapping technologies, have your own maps local. There's no reason why you couldn't do that. It just takes some more coding and some more work to put that together. But since Alpha has the ability to cache server-side information, you could cache a whole bunch of photos, videos, maps, etc., have them local on the device so that no matter what, you could at least show them a map of the area, and maybe with a pre-made map with some markers on them or things like that, if you really needed to make sure they always had that mapping capability available.
Great, thanks very much. So yes, you do still need an internet connection. We aren't actually keeping the geographical images in the client, but there are ways of doing that, and there are open source places where you can actually get these maps. There's one in particular, I think, called Open Streets. I might be wrong about that name.
Yeah.
You can take a look. All right, so another couple of questions. This one has to do with GPS. They would like to know, can I use GPS instead of getting a location based on a cell tower Wi-Fi ISP location? Can I do that in my application?
Interesting. Yeah, basically there's two ways to handle that. Is that, as I showed before, if I go ahead and click on here, here I'm asking where am I getting the location or address from. One of those is device location. And you're going to also see this in the UXs. When you save data, you can actually tell the system to get the current location and save that information. So you can geocode when people are entering data into your database. But what this is going to do is actually make a call to whatever platform you're on. And so in the case of a web deployed application through a web browser, let's say I'm on an iOS and I have it inside of mobile Safari, it's going to make a call through Safari to get the location information. And it may ask the user, hey, this app that's running inside the browser wants your location. Do you want to give it to them? And you can say yes or no. But again, that's going to use whatever is available on the local platform. So that could be GPS, Wi-Fi, cell tower. They use a combination. I don't know if anybody's turned off their Wi-Fi and then gone into a mapping app. It often tells you, hey, if you have Wi-Fi on, we can give you better location information, because I think they trap all the IP addresses and use it to triangulate to a finer degree. So that's one. Now, the other thing I like to show is that when you go in, and let's say you are going to be building this as a PhoneGap app, when you do so, there are APIs that are available through PhoneGap to give you geolocation data. So you can actually use the PhoneGap API, and then you'll be using some JavaScript to make a call. And there's a really powerful, cool thing about that is, one, that most often the security settings of the mobile device will ask you, do you want to provide this app location data? But the neat thing about that is it's usually a one-time deal, meaning that if you say yes, then every time it's not asking you over and over, do you want to give the location information to this app? It remembers that that app has permissions to grab your location information. But you would use that through the PhoneGap core plugins to be able to do. And again, this is going to, I'm not sure, what source within the hardware, but it uses whatever the hardware's, capabilities, the GPS, the Wi-Fi, etc. I don't know if you can specify. You may be able to specify through the API. I haven't experimented with it, but I'm not sure how much control you have over saying, give me the location, but only use, say, GPS. Don't use anything else, or vice versa, or something along those lines.
Right. Actually, if I could expand on that example a bit, there is a sample application that I'm planning on posting today. And actually, if I could take control of the screen here for a minute.
Yes, please do.
Show it off to you. So let me go to...
I want to see it.
All right, excellent. Just make myself the presenter here. Click Make Presenter. Show my screen. Great, okay. And I should be over here on Windows 7. Dan, can you see my screen now?
Let's see, and yes, I can, sir.
Excellent. So this is the application. It's called Pump Jack Pro. For those of you who don't know what a pump jack is it's a pump jack is one of these things that looks like a horse's head that bobs up and down in front of an oil well to help. It's the machinery that basically pumps the oil out of the ground. You probably see them a bunch in Texas, if I were to imagine.
Every other street.
Every other street, yeah, I imagine. All right, so let me go over to working preview. I'm just going to show you what this app looks like, and it does use GPS. I'm going to go ahead and load this up. And like I said, the source files will be posted hopefully today at our GitHub account, which is github.com/alphaanywhere. So this is the location button. It doesn't work in working preview, but when I click on it, it'll fill in the latitude and the longitude. And this is really, really simple to code, and it does work offline. You do not need to have a Wi-Fi connection for this to work, which means that it works on pure GPS as well. And the way I coded this, let me just pop up to the button, which is here. It's here. Here it is. I did it in Action JavaScript. So it's a geolocation function. It's one of the ones that you can find when you add a new action. And here are the options under it. You can say set the fields to the retrieved data. So in this case, I already had one that was called latitude and one that was called longitude, so it was easy. But you can always do field mapping right in here. I said auto map, but you can do individual mappings, and that's about it. So you can just, I mean, to add a button, it really is just, add a button.
Can you open that again? I want to expand on something in a moment. Go ahead and complete your thought.
Yeah, what I'm saying is, if you just go here, you click add a new action, do a search for geolocation. So geolocation functions. This is where you get all these options. Anyway, Dan, go ahead.
Yeah, no, actually, if you just leave that open or open up yours real quick, that next, notice it will say property map, then after it, get accurate position within a designated radius. One of the cool things, and this was actually one of the projects we worked on, is that how geolocation works is that the longer it's trying to get its geolocation, the more accurate it becomes. So when you go to get a geolocation, often it says, okay, I'm within a kilometer in the first 20 milliseconds. Because it has like the latest where it was. So you can actually go in there and say, listen, I really need to have a certain level of accuracy on my geolocation, and you can specify in this so it will keep trying to grab the location data till it gets a sort of a accurate enough location for you. And this you can allow you can decide how accurate that needs to be. So it's something I think that was very interesting is that, again, the first thing it pops, it's like, gets kind of a broad, this is like roughly where you're at, and then it continues in the hardware to kind of get it down to a smaller and smaller radius. You can dictate, well, how desired of a radius do you want it to be, and that way you can kind of guide the app to say how accurate you want it to be. And that there's trade-offs in terms of how long it takes to gain that accuracy, other pieces along those lines. And this is important because, like, for instance, we had a company that had to have, when a person did something, they wanted to track to make sure they were actually at that location doing it. So they weren't at a Starbucks saying, oh yeah, I'm at this pump jack and I've just fixed it. And meanwhile, they're at a Starbucks just typing it into their mobile phone. So what this allows them to do is say, listen, make sure it's that this geolocation is accurate within a certain amount. So they had to be so close to the actual location before it would even accept the record into the database. So there's some really cool things you can do around there. I wanted to add to that. And then there's a timeout that's built into there that if it just eventually can't get, for whatever reason, can't get it, it can tell you, keep trying for this amount of time. And then if it can't, then throw up an error, say, hey, I just couldn't get your accurate location. So at least you can say, I'm not putting bad data in my database in terms of a bad location. So a lot of power in here.
Great. Thanks, Dan. So I'm going to hand this back over to you. Okay.
Dynamite.
Make the presenter. And I'll get to some more questions here in our questions window.
Excellent. Good questions.
Oh, here's a good one. It's one that we've talked about, but I don't know that we specifically showed how to do it. And it has to do with SVG icons. And the question is, how do I use an SVG icon as a button image?
Good question. Let me go ahead and see if I can put that together for you real quick. I'll just go back into my UX here. I'm going to add a button. So I'm in my area. I'm just going to put it at the bottom here. and I'm going to go down to other controls, and then you'll notice the second one here is called button. So I can now go in here, and I've added a button there. I can type some text like hello or whatever it happens to be. But now you can have advanced button control type, and you could set this button as either a button, a hyperlink, or as an image. And if you collect image, then you can go into the image name here, and you can click on SVG, and if you've gone through our previous and uploaded our images, which I think, is it in? Oh, I don't have it in this one. Okay. I don't have those in there, but you would click SVG icon, then select the SVG, because I don't have it in this UX. It was associated with a specific UX. But you would just click SVG icon. But in this case, what I did is I took this button, I said I want to show this button as an image that goes here. Now, I think I can also go to button here, and I can go down to button layout and say I want it to be, say, an image only button or a image followed by text. And again, I'm still going to have a control where I can select the image. I select on there, click SVG, and if I've loaded my SVG icons onto this UX, then you would be able to select those images there. So that's how you would associate. You can either turn the button into an image alone, so it's just it just treats it as an image, puts it on there, or you can maintain that kind of button structure, but say it's an image followed by the text. Either situation, look for the property called image name, select it, select SVG icon. It could have been CSS, but SVG, select the one you want, and what it does is when it renders that button, it's going to render it using the SVG image or information along with maybe text or whatever else you designate to be part of that. So I hope that answers the question.
That's great. Next is a question of how do you, this is a reports question, how to display and print reports in PDF format in a mobile application.
Very good. Another interesting aspect.
Or should you, is another question too.
You can. And let me show you, let's see, I think, do I have a good report one here? Let me see if I've got, I'm just trying to see if I already have one that's already been done.
Dean, while you look for that, I am going to tell you something I'm not supposed to tell you, which is that Alpha Anywhere version 4.2 is bound to be released either today or tomorrow. Inside information, you heard it here first. You didn't hear it from me. But in this is going to have the ability to print, basically create a report using the freeform, not just the table layout editor, but the freeform editor, the one that a lot of people use, to create an SVG version of the report. Cool, huh? That will appear displayed very nicely inside a mobile application, and it's really to handle this exact issue. So there might be other ways to do it, and Dan could take a look at it, but I just want to let you guys know, and I'm sure we are going to demonstrate that in an upcoming session real soon. Yeah,
that's high priority, mainly because I got to tell you the table layout works fine, and it's very powerful, but the freeform report is much easier to create complex reports. It's just there's just less friction involved with doing it. So I'm very, very excited about that. That's pretty cool. Man, that's really cool. And SVG is lightning fast and is like pixel accurate. We're going to be able to do a lot of really cool stuff.
It does. It also renders much, much faster too. So we will be talking about that. That will show up prominently soon.
Yeah, and while I do this, the other thing is that PDFs are very server intensive. When the server goes back and starts creating that PDF, it really hammers the server because it's like a print driver that basically says, give me all the resources as I render this PDF, put it together, and send it back. So it's pretty, I don't want to say toxic, but it's pretty hardcore on how that goes there. So let me get this set up real quick. Let's go ahead and go to... Okay, and I'm just going to pick any report here. And I go to... And I will come back and explain what I'm doing here, but I just want to go ahead and put it together and see if I can get it to work. That's exciting.
It is exciting. I can't wait to show that off.
Yeah, I would highly recommend not doing that. Yeah, I don't know. What's interesting is let's try live preview, see what happens in live preview real quick. I've always gone with HTML layout because I do know I want to render it and do it fast in the mobile device. My understanding is that the PDF kind of opens up in and of itself. So let's see. Yeah, let's see.
It tends to jump out of your phone application into
out of
whatever
the app.
out of the app and into whatever your device has for rendering PDFs. So it's not always the smoothest experience, which is why this new SVG thing is the way to go.
So it works, but yeah, it's time consuming. It's just not as clean kind of thing. But let me show you how I did this. Okay, so let me explain what I have here. Is on my first page of my mobile app, I have a button here, and when I click that button, it's going to run a report and display it in my second panel. So I click on that button, and you'll see it'll take a moment, and then actually let me go ahead and go back in, and I think I had to be in live preview. Let's do a full preview here. Then I'll walk you through how I built this. So I've got my UX and my system here. I've got, you'll see there's nothing up my sleeves. And then we got home. If I click this button, you'll see a kind of a flash in a moment while it's going through and rendering that report. And it's opened it up here in the second report here. And so this is a PDF. As you can see, I think it's because of my styling or something like that. So how I did that is the following, is that I went ahead and used, and again, that's why PDFs are pretty hardcore. Okay, why are you opening up back there? Because you're right, it has to depend on the viewer capability of whatever system you're on. Oh no, I might have locked up here, everybody. Oh no, there we are. So the first thing I did is I just created using one of our templates. It's called a template. It's a mobile template with tab buttons. And on the first panel card, I added a button. On the second panel card, I actually deleted some static text. So there used to be static, but I made this empty. Now on that button, I went ahead and went to the click event. In here, I added a new action by typing report. It's called open a report label or letter layout. And what I did in there is the first thing I did was it asked me, well, what report do you want to show? And I have, as you've seen, a bunch of different reports I've built. I could pick any one of those that have them there. So let's see. Let's go ahead and create a demo. I'll select the different for Googles that are for giggles. Then I'm going to say the initial view with PDF. As you can see, it could be HTML and now SVG. Very exciting, especially if you can use the free form to generate it. That's super awesome. Now, I said what report I want, what format I want it to be displayed in, and then last but not least down here, the target. So the target is normally set to window, meaning that it's going to pop up in a window on top, but that doesn't really make sense in a mobile platform. So instead what I'm going to do is going to click here and say panel, and then I select, well, which panel card do I want to show it in? In this case, panel card number 2. And I've got another few little things I can do there. So I click OK, save that. So all I had was a button on here and an empty panel card called panel card number 2. Save that, go into live preview, do a full preview. Yeah, that SVG is going to be fast. Then when we go here, you'll see on my first page, my first panel, nothing on the second panel. I click that. You'll see in a moment it'll do the little circle thing as it's generating, and there is my report. And I think it's a little faster now because it loaded up whatever the rendering and some of the stuff. So, but as you can see, this is a PDF report. It's using whatever the native controls are for PDF. So again, can't vouch for how this is actually going to operate on the end device like an iOS device. I'd have to put it on the server and test it on my device. But it will work. We just have to see, you'd want to test it. And an easy way to do that, by the way, is just do remote test, full preview. And then you get the IP address of your machine here, and what it does is it puts that up, and so long as your mobile device and your machine is on the same network, it can read this and make a call to the development machine, and you can actually run it inside the browser inside your mobile device connected to the development machine and see how it operates there. That's a real fast, quick way for you to test the validity of how your system works and whether this will work nicely on the platform you're targeting. It's a little bit long-winded, but we got a little sneak peek of what's out. Cool.
Excellent. All right, another question. This one has to do with, you were talking a moment ago about server load, and this is a server load question. It said, is it best to validate data entry values using Alpha or MySQL MariaDB? If you had a choice as to where you would put your validation code, and I presume that this means you're not doing it client side, you're doing it server side. Should you do the Alpha server or the MySQL? If the client side is always best because that's super fast and it's the way to go if you can, but often you can't. So,
well, and I would do client side, and the main reason, it's immediate.
Yep.
With server side, you have to submit the form data. So there's one benefit is you put all your validation in one location. Downside of that is that you have to submit and go through the submission of the form back to the server, and therefore you don't get that immediate. Like, so if you put in an incorrect social security number or CVV code or something like that, if you're doing client-side validation using Alpha, either through local JavaScript or through that, then it's immediate, and you see immediately whether it is valid or not. Therefore, the user doesn't have to modify, submit, modify, submit. So I tend to do all of my validation on Alpha on the front side. The other thing that's really, really powerful about that too is that I have a lot of flexibility in terms of how I do my validation, meaning I could validate it against a web service. So, you know, I wouldn't have to connect MariaDB to a web service. I could literally take that input valid, call out to web servers using Alpha, do a validation against a web service, and then have it. Therefore, I'm not stuck with having only one method of validation, which is sort of database. So you have a wider range of validation capabilities if you use the Alpha than you do if you use, say, the database validation.
Excellent. Let me see what else I've got here. Question is, does Alpha yet support dynamic tables and columns in MariaDB?
I don't know the answer to that.
I don't know the answer to that, but I do know the person who would know the answer to that. If you want to send that same question over to guides@alphasoftware.com, I will talk to our MariaDB SQL Server expert who's down the hall from me and get you the answer to that question.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I'd like to find a little bit more about that. Sounds like a cool function. Yeah. Not sure it would.
One thing that I promised that I would bring up, many of you know that we have a new documentation person here at Alpha, and documentation has sometimes been a sticking point in the past, but we feel that we're getting much, much better. But one of the things that's been created recently is a brand new tutorial for teaching you how to build mobile applications. And this is a very extensive tutorial. It's out, it's available, and I've pasted it into the chat window. And I would really very much appreciate it if you are going to go through it, if you could give us some feedback. If you could write back and say, I like this, I hate this, I'm running into some problems, whatever. So you'll see this here in the chat window. It goes to alphasoftware.com/documentation link. So if you want to just grab that from the chat window, anyone who's interested in doing a tutorial, we'd very much like to hear your feedback on it. So I'm sure it's going to be excellent. A couple people have already gone through it here, but we'd like to get your take on it as well. Okay, let me see. Wow, we've got a ton of questions. Here's a really quick, simple JavaScript question, so let's just get into that. You gave us an example a little earlier, Dean, in which you had a JavaScript thing that was looping through an array, I think, to build your map markers. So if you could show us that little snippet again, that would be helpful.
Sure.
And it just has to do... And so a lot of people are familiar with many different languages. Sometimes JavaScript seems a little weird. You're actually right on the line. For var equals for var I equals 0, I less than the length I plus plus. Can you explain? I know this is very, very rudimentary XBasic, but I know a lot of people don't know rudimentary JavaScript. I'm sorry. The I plus plus. What does that mean? And how does that work?
Yeah, so just let me dissect this. So the first thing we're doing is we're defining and building a variable I, which is going to track what row I'm on. And it's saying for I equals 0 to less than the length, what the I plus plus means is that increment by 1. So the plus plus just says take whatever that in that variable and an increment by 1. So basically in this for loop, what it's going to do is it sets it to I0, checks it against this, says, Yep, go ahead. It processes this next time through, and then it increments it by 1. So I++ just says take the variable I and increment it by the value of 1. So add 1 to whatever it is. So it keeps going through that loop of I equals this, okay, I equals I plus 1, go through it again, keep going through it until this center item, which is I is less than D dot length. D is the length of that list data. So we had a list of locations. So we basically got, D is that list of items, and underscore D dot length is the number of items in that list. So basically it's going to walk through that starting at 0. It's going to go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 until it gets to the length of the list minus 1. Because we started at 0, it's minus 1. It's less than that. So that's how, as long as it stays less than that, it keeps processing that loop. So that's how, it's a little arcane. There's a lot of really good JavaScript kind of online resources, but ++ is basically increment that variable by 1.
That is great. Thank you. Let me see what else we've got here for questions. Okay. Oh, our documentation person, Sarah, has pointed out rightly that there is an easy way now to navigate to the release notes. That's if you just go to alphasoftware.com/documentation. There's a link for release notes. Let's see if she's telling the truth.
Documentation.
There you go.
There we go, right here.
Release notes right there. Yep.
Release notes.
So we encourage everyone here, unless you're looking for, right now this doesn't, the documentation system does not do a search of the message board. So that's why a lot of people, including Dan, I think, like to use the Google when they're doing searches for information related to Alpha. But if you're looking for something that was either previously in the wiki or was in the help system, anything except for what's in the message board, I strongly suggest you use the search right here at alphasoftware.com/documentation. It is super fast and the results are neatly organized, and you will find what you're looking for.
And help us out. If you see something that doesn't make sense or there, click this report an issue, and it'll allow our documentation team to get that feedback to improve the documentation so we can make it better and better and better as we move forward. So
great.
Help us help you.
Exactly. That's right.
Yes.
And do click that report an issue with a page. We get probably 2 or 3 of those every day, and we fix those things immediately. If you find an issue or something wrong with it, that link does not go nowhere. While it opens up an email, so you need to have your email client configured.
Yeah.
We do look at these. So we have a team of people who will. All you do is just click the link and say what's wrong.
Yep.
There's a question back to mapping, and the question is, if you have an application which is accessed via the internet, so you're assuming there's always going to be a connection, is there any good reason to use JavaScripting over, say, having the maybe the map stuff happen on the server side?
Yeah, there's only one reason well, in that case, obviously I would lean towards using Action JavaScript because it's much faster to develop and build, which is the goal, is to get it done and get it out and get it used. But JavaScript has zero connection to the database or to the server most of the time. So you will get speed improvements because everything will happen on the device locally. And we're kind of moving more and more that direction. More and more Action JavaScript actually generates pure JavaScript that runs on the client, especially when we start working with things like client-side data caches, where when a person launches the app, you could download a whole bunch of data, have it ready so that they get an immediate response kind of thing. So, if speed's an issue, then you want to definitely look at JavaScript because then you're going to be on the local machine at all time. But the trade-off is that instead of just pointing and clicking, you're going to have to write this kind of code and then debug it and maintain it. So it's a matter of a trade-off between speed of development and maintenance cost of maintaining that code versus if it's really required, then yeah, obviously you can dive into JavaScript and use it right there and get some benefits in terms of speed and local device interaction.
Excellent. It looks like we're not. We do have a couple more questions to answer, but some of them look like they're going to take more than the 5 minutes that we have left. So,
but we can queue them up for next week.
we will definitely queue them up for next week. And if you want to send additional questions to guides@alphasoftware.com, that would be great. Is there anything else that you'd like to point out, Dion, while I go taking a look through these?
No. I just, again, we really appreciate everybody taking time each week. We apologize we weren't able to get to your questions today. We will line them up and execute on those. And, you know, I'm excited. I heard, you know, a new feature, that SVG stuff is really cool.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
pretty neat. You know, I've always been like, I like layout tables because they're fast, but man, I like the older development system for the reports.
They are, and to be honest, most people are still using the older ones to do their reports. Yeah. So, which I'm not surprised.
Yeah, and again, I think the other benefit is we should start seeing reports are really heavy. In fact, you know, we created the report server because people were doing reports. I actually talked to someone about a month ago that had literally were running reports for 8 hours a night because they basically had to take like this monster database and create reports of the data that's in the reports and save them as files onto the disk, and it literally would be kind of scraping a whole database every night, and they literally would take 8 hours to run all those reports just because it was just a massive amount of time creating these PDFs and things along those lines. And obviously PDFs are so valuable in there. But, you know, hey, anytime you can slash off that kind of effort on the server side, you don't need as big a server. You can put more people on that server. The server is faster response time. So it's all good. Very exciting.
Cool. Here's a cool question, and I think you will be able to answer this.
Oh, good.
Time remaining. And so now with pins in a map, can you have it so that the pin can call a URL that's in a database table that will play a video in the video player component? I don't know that you could do that in 3 minutes, but I mean, can you trigger actions like that to work off of the pin?
Yes. Yes, you can, because what you can do is, let me see if I can do this real quick, add a marker from the list. Okay. Okay, so this, let's see, marker view, marker settings, okay. So here's what you can do is that in here in marker settings, you can have it call a JavaScript function when the person clicks on that marker. And the JavaScript function can reference what's called data. So when it clicks on the marker, it's going to call this JavaScript function, and then in that JavaScript function, it hands it what marker got clicked on. And then within that, you can do anything you want. So what I would most likely do is I would use and create a Action JavaScript here, like show video, and then I would go in here and I would add my action to say go to a page or do whatever it happens to be. Let's just do this real quick, okay? So I click OK. So all this is going to do is show a message box. Now I can copy this, so this is what runs that, show video. So now what I can do is I can create a JavaScript function, my cool function, okay, and in here this is going to be passed like data, and then in here what I can do is I can say, okay, if you know from the data, like data dot ID is, you know, video ID, I'm just making this up, but ID is equal to data.id. So what's going to happen is when that's clicked, you put in my cool function as what is executed, the function. It passes this data information. I'm not sure if that's the exact format. You'd have to look at that. And from there, then I can extract what marker, and then from there I can call Action JavaScript. I can do anything I want. So it's definitely doable. The other thing you may want to, you know, so maybe if you're just navigating to a page or opening a page, there's different ways to approach it. But the real trick on this is that when you create the button here, so I go on here, I can, on this click event here, you'll notice that it has it right here. I can either write the JavaScript right in here, or I can, you know, call that function, passing it the data of what was put in here. So that's really cool. ability. So you can definitely do what you're saying, where if they click on it can send them to a web page that has a certain video on it, or open up a UX or do something along those lines. And I know that was a little bit all over the place, but that's the desire, is that just check out the on-click event for the marker settings, and you set the function that will be called when that person clicks on that marker. It's given the data of what marker it is, and from there you can do anything you want with it in terms of triggering other JavaScript or making an XBasic callback or many, many different things from there.
Wonderful. Well, we are out of time. I want to thank everyone who showed up today, participated. I want to thank you, Dan, for presenting.
Thank you very much.
This will be available at videos.alphasoftware.com. Oh, I did not get back to showing you where to find the videos. Let me, you know what, I will send that out when I send out the next invitation. But we do have our older documentation, our older video system up and running again. Just want to let you guys know that. And if you do have questions during the week, please send them to guides, G-U-I-D-E-S, at alphasoftware.com. So thanks again for attending, and we hope to see you at a future webinar. Take care and goodbye.